I don't know if you guys had heard this or not, but I think I want to say I brought it up during our interview with Scott, and I brought it up during the interview with Thurston. But since you guys are bringing it up, the current state of judging, right? Something that I had brought up to both of them, and this was because I had been watching a lot of other quote unquote judged athletic arts activities, like in the Olympics and stuff, which is this whole notion of understanding if you do everything perfectly within the program that you're putting out there, what's the max score you can get? What is the highest level that you can achieve with regards to like placements, right? Because then I feel like it's something that is very much unsaid right now, which is that only a handful of groups have a chance at winning overall. Only a handful of groups have a chance of winning percussion, but that's never implicitly said. Who's in, who's out. Everybody goes out, plays the same level of clean, but because of what you're doing, right? This is as high as the score is going to go for you, because if you knew that early on, that would cause you to adjust certain things in a different way during the season, you know?
For sure.
And I don't know if there's necessarily a chance to get there, because immediately I think your mind goes to, well, everybody's doing stuff that is so different from each other. But your potential is still being evaluated, right? And compared one group to the next group. So I guess like kind of like a general question is the current judging system, you know, good, adequate? What are some things that could be better about it?
Are the right things being rewarded?
Are the right things being rewarded? That's obviously like a hot topic too, you know? What do you guys think?
I'll start.
A question right there.
I'll start my statement by saying this. I do not envy judges at all.
No.
Because no matter what you do, you're going to get bitched at by somebody.
And also, also the time. I remember this was actually brought up. This was brought up. Maybe it was during an SCPA thing or a WGI. I think it was during an SCPA thing, because they were talking about the amount of time the judges get, right? And they've even adjusted that. They've even done things where it's like after a certain number of groups, judges can go back and adjust their scores just for the sake of like.
I think it's like 4 groups or something like that.
Right. So, but it's always like no reads, no previous reads, no looking at it before. It has to be like literally in the moment. You have to be reacting to everything in the moment. Is even that part of it right?
Which I don't even understand the previous reads part. Like that doesn't make sense that you wouldn't want a judge to have a previous read, because even when you go into critique, they like give notes of like, well, we want you to catch this part of the show. Like I feel like the better the judge knows about the show, the better the read he's going to give the group. Like, well, I know that the percussion is going to be at the front at this moment, so I got to position myself to read it. I don't understand if that's still a thing. I personally don't understand why you wouldn't want somebody to have a read. To think that a judge doesn't have access to YouTube in these days is just ridiculous anyway. But to kind of double back, so I don't envy the judging. I do find it interesting when like a judge is like, you guys aren't doing enough, you guys aren't doing enough, you guys aren't doing enough for group A, versus group B is just like, man, I really appreciate the space and the tacit time there. It's like, where's the line there versus reward of like content versus achievement? I wish that like every group could listen to every other group's judges tapes. Like when you are for the Olympics, for example, like you see what every judge gives that person that goes on before you, and then you see what every judge gives that. I mean, there's not really like a look into why they gave that, but I do think that transparency is like pretty awesome. I would say if you say judging is adequate, you're wrong. Not that because it's bad, but that would be complacent. And I think that the judges should ever be just like, all right, how can we get better? How can we get better? How can we give these groups better reads? How can we do more for the product on the field? And I think that talking with some judges, they do have those conversations, and like obviously they've made rule changes to the percussion judge specifically on having just the percussion judge like limit on how far you can go back, which is change the arranging game for sure. But I hope that they're continuously just reaching into their mind of like, well, I gave this group credit for this and I took away for this group for doing this, so I got to make that unilateral or like across the board. Like that's got to be my stance. But I don't know if that always happens.
I think Evan's definitely got more of, I know Evan's thought more about this than I have, just in text groups we're in and hearing, talking with other friends of ours and everything. But you mentioned the if group A and B both play at the same level of clarity, how do you assess, like, is this, how high of a ceiling can you give that group in clarity? I would hope that the way it's set up, and I don't know what judge training's like. I don't know how they describe achievement versus comp in the music category, for example. We'll just use that as an example here, that I would hope that it would be set up in a way to where you have group A playing much easier stuff than group B, but group A is literally like 99 out of 100 in clarity. Like everything they're doing is perfectly together, blended, balanced, but it's super easy. They would get a 99 in achievement and like a 47 in comp. And then you'd have group B, okay, you're pulling off like a 90 in achievement, but your comp is like a 97. Like they would beat the pants off of group A, but the group A still achieved that 99 in achievement. So I would hope that would be how it would be. Do you guys know? Just from
I love when
knowledge?
I see the boxes split.
Yes,
like
right.
if it's just 1 1 2 2 3 3, I'm
And
like,
and
that's
and it's
that's
basically,
nowhere that's right.
Like, and this is an ignorant point of view because it's definitely from the outside of it. But I have asked some of my friends who are judges, like, so how do you reconcile this? And basically what it looks like from the outside is that the numbers are just being paced from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Like, so around mid-July, they should be around here. Beginning
Like
of
there's
August,
a cap.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
and
like-
it's just, and both numbers seem to kind of go up at this pace versus like what you're saying, where it's like, I understand that shows change over the course of a season, but what doesn't make sense is that a show changes as much as the clarity gets better. Yet you see
Yeah.
the numbers go up at the same pace.
Like I want to see the first show happen and the recap comes out of the first regional, and I want to see a group. So we'll just use Crown for an example, or Blue Coats or whatever. Content 93, like first show of the season.
Right.
Achievement 57.
Right.
And like you're gonna change licks, you're gonna update phrases, you're gonna change parts of the show musically, as the season goes on. So that comp score might change some, but I mean, if you think of it in a very ones and zeros way, like I presented it, like your comp score should be like a judge on the first read in June would be like, all right, cool, you all wrote like a 95. But you're
Use
playing
that
it about
And,
buzzword.
and maybe if you water your show, right, that comp score goes down a little bit, but the achievement goes up.
But exactly, and then you find
But that's just
where
like
your
that's just
balance
like a figure
is.
skater doing a triple jump instead of a quadruple jump.
Right,
Yep.
right. Dude, that's a buzzword trigger when that judge is on the tape saying like the words clarity of intent or what. It's like, oh, your clarity of intent. And you're like, ah.
It's
But
like, I see what you're trying to do there, but you're not doing it yet.
and I do understand how if you get cleaner as an ensemble, that would make your show more effective.
Which is
because
something
what you're
that-
doing comes across.
Which is something that they say. Which is something
that they say. Honestly,
Right.
it really feels more like there's one music caption. If you're talking about WGI, for example, there's one music caption and there's three design captions. The music PA is the music, and then music effect, visual effect, and visual all feel way more like design boxes to me.
Yeah, and we talked about this in the chat. I was at one of and like it's funny because we talk about they would say, the organizations would say that every year after the season we meet up to make sure that the judging is what it should be, right? They have these meetings, but I was there in the meetings after the 2016 season where they talked about exactly what you said, which is you have this music achievement score and it was being weighted a certain way. There's a certain like multiplier or certain, like that number, how it's factored into the total score.
Well, music effect and music are 60 points, and visual
Right.
effect and visual are
So there was a proposal on the table to and I apologize to anybody if I'm misrepresenting this, but there was a proposal on the table to take away some of that weight that the music achievement score was giving, because, and the argument was that clean implicitly impacts design, all those other captions. When a group comes out and they're just performing at a super high level, you cannot help but have that bleed over into the effect captions, into the more design captions. And so they were saying that that it was having such an impact implicitly that they didn't want it to have like this practical impact. They want to take away a little bit of the impact and the weight of it on the sheets. But in the discussion, in which something we talked about, they can debate these things in those meetings literally for hours on end. It boiled down to this discussion of, what are we rewarding? Are we rewarding design, or are we rewarding the kids? And, and everybody in the room, the majority of them were designers, but also a lot of them were educators. So obviously they're impacting like both of those things. But that I think that is not necessarily a resolved discussion these days,
No,
Well,
I don't think so.
Let me jump in real quick before I lose this train of thought. In that same vein, I think this indoor season that just wrapped up, and Evan and I touched on this in our recent episode of our recap of finals, would kind of say that clarity is more important a little bit. Because, my final conclusion after the season, if you look at Independent World, X and Broken City, to me, and Evan, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm pretty sure you said the same thing. X and Broken City had better shows than Pulse did. From a design standpoint and effectiveness standpoint, how they impacted the crowd visually and musically. And the recap kind of agrees with that. If you look at it closely and kind of pick it apart, the activity kind of said, all right, Pulse, you were just too clean. You had to win. Like, you played your butt off.
Right.
But I would argue that X and Broken City, I think, had better shows. So I would use that. Now, that's my opinion, but I think there's a little bit of evidence of that in the recap sheets, but I think you could use that to argue that they do reward clarity, whether they intend to or not, over design choices.
I agree with that in the outcome this year, but I don't think that clarity is implicit in all the other captions. If somebody would suggest that, I'd be like, well, I don't know about that, because I see some kids miss some dots and some diddles miss some clarity there, but Group X is still right up there because what they're being asked to do is really hard. So I wouldn't say that, and they're getting rewarded for that, which is fine, I guess, but I wouldn't say that it's implicit in all the captions. So I like the way it's set up.
And I don't want to say this year's example is like, this means it's this way for all of band. Like, it was just kind of like let's relate this to the season that just ended a little bit, kind of opportunity, and kind of get that out there. But yeah,